Part 1. The False Sun. Chapter 1. There were countless reasons why the library was my favourite room in the Gathrax Manor. The portraits of long-dead mages weren't one of them. The manor was a maze of rooms, ballrooms with elaborate chandeliers and dining halls larger than most homes in the town. Of all of them, the library warmed my soul. It was a place of comfort and escape. If Dame, the lead of the Gathrax's army of servants, had not been assisting me, I might have slipped a book into my jacket to take home for later enjoyment. I stared at the painting before me. It was one of many adorning the walls in the library, but certainly the biggest, taking up an entire wall by itself. The unnamed artist had colourfully depicted the heart oak, bathed in furious black flame. "In all of your 25 years, Maximus Oaken, that darn painting hasn't changed," Dame chortled, her voice rasped with age. "If you want to finish up early, get back to dusting." I glanced over my shoulder as the ancient woman poked her head around a stack of shelves, the spectacles on the end of her nose enlarging her colourless eyes. "I'm in no rush," I replied. "Dancing isn't exactly high on the list of things I enjoy." "Well," Dame waved an oiled cloth at me in dismissal, "I bloody enjoy dancing, so get to it. These old bones deserve to rattle tonight." Dame always had a way of making me laugh. With a dramatic wink, her magnified eye was as comical as her grin. "Dryads help you," I called out, disappearing around a stretch of shelves, each double-stacked with old tomes. "Rattling bones doesn't sound as enticing as you think." "Don't knock it until you try it, love." For such a stern-looking woman, Dame certainly looked out for me, more so than her other members of staff. It was likely because she'd known me from such a young age. Like the other children unfortunate enough to be born within the servants' quarters, I was put to work by the age of 6. Dame had kept her eye out for me since. I called it favouritism, she called it pity. Plucking the cloth from my belt and retrieving the vial of oil from my pocket, I left the painting behind, although the image was always deep in my mind. My nose itched as the scent of ancient novels and dust struck me. Time and lack of use blended into a pleasant smell. The stale air carried the echo of countless stories. Over the years, I had read many of them, though servants weren't allowed to so much as touch the Gathrax's collection of tomes. King Gathrax preferred his servants to lack education. He believed an absence of knowledge would keep us controllable, which in some cases was true. It never stopped me from borrowing a book or 4. It wasn't stealing if I put it back, but it was a risk, and one worth taking. Aldian was built on the back of stories. There were myths of dragons and dryads, phoenix kings who dwelled on thrones of fire, and the nymphs who once lived within the waterways of this world. I knew these tales as I knew the lines on my palm. Many were historic imaginings of Aldian's history, full of accurate accounts. Others were exaggerated, made up to reflect the world in the way the author deemed necessary. One fact all the stories had in common was magic, and I loathed it. With every fibre of my being, I hated magic. Magic was to blame for the state of the world. A world where some thrive in wealth and others drown just trying to survive. Everyone else seemed to celebrate magic's memory, but I was never more thankful for something disappearing, burned away from our history when the source of the Southern Mage's power was destroyed. I moved through the library, dusting the dark-stained shelves, passing the countless books I had read. Out of the hundreds I'd devoured, there were likely thousands more I had yet to open. Some might think it depressing, that I had a lifetime of serving ahead of me. I couldn't help but imagine just how many more of King Gathrax's books I would take, absorb and return without them ever realizing. It was those small acts of defiance that kept me going. The day slipped away quickly, as it always did in this room. Beyond the crimson-stained glass windows, the skies darkened. I was bathed in the ruling colour of Gathrax, red. "Have you not finished yet?" Dame shuffled around the wall of shelves towards me, fingertips stained orange from the cleaning oil. As always, her enlarged eyes surveyed my work. It was common for Dame to smile, which made reading her emotions a task in itself. Unless when she outright frowned, which she did at that very moment. "How long's a piece of string?" I retorted. "Maximus, the festival starts in just shy of an hour, and you've not touched even half of your portion of the room." "It won't take me long," I said, brushing off her displeased glare with a flick of my dust-coated cloth. "Go, leave me to finish in peace." "Are you dismissing me, boy?" For all the years I had known Dame, she always looked the same. Long, snow-white hair pinned up in a neat bun, the same apron wrapped around her aged frame, marked from years of grease, grime and muck. "I'd never dismiss you," I said, moving towards the large oak doors. "It is merely a suggestion. The sooner you leave me, the quicker I will be finished." Dame clicked her tongue across her teeth, sizing me up with both hands on her rounded hips. "One day, and one day soon, someone is going to smack that sarcastic look right off you." I raised a hand and rubbed the phantom ache at Dame's threat. "And ruin such a pretty face?" She rolled her eyes and moved for the door. "Insufferable you are." "I love you too," I replied. I swept my hand towards the now open door, encouraging her to leave. Dame passed me, mumbling something beneath her breath. I knew from the tone alone she was smiling. "What would you have me tell your parents if you don't show up?" Dame asked. "If you see them, tell them not to wait," I said, proving to Dame something she already had figured out. I had no intention of joining in on the evening's festivities. With the library to myself and King Gathrax and his family far from the manor, I had an entire night of fictional adventure ahead of me. "If I see them, I shall tell them their son is a menace and lacks the ability to follow a command," Dame replied, brushing her liver-spotted hand down her apron. "Oh, you know me well." Dame popped her hip, leaning on one leg whilst she surveyed me. "Perhaps you could trade those fictional men for one made of flesh and bone." I brought my fingers to my mouth and mocked a gag. "Dryads? Why would I do that?" My sarcasm didn't go unnoticed. Dame's mouth cracked into a grin, her eyes narrowing as she fought the urge to laugh. "At my old age and experience, I could list off many reasons why flesh is better than paper, but I wouldn't want to embarrass you." As much as I enjoyed the concept of wasting my evening flirting, it wouldn't have served me come morning. News spread like wildfire through the manor, and I knew better than to have heads turning on me. "Here," I said, turning to the shelf behind me. My eyes traced the shelves, searching for a book I had recently read. Its cover was leather-bound and plain, no hint of the knee-buckling smut that made up most of the pages. "Take this, and then you'll discover why I prefer my men made from ink and parchment." Dame took the book, a cheeky glint illuminated by her thick glasses. "I have already read it." Heat flooded my cheeks. "You have?"
"Did you not hear what I said about age and experience?"
"You win," I said, hands raised in surrender at my sides. Dame rolled her eyes again.
"Get the job done, and I will see you at the Green, Master Oaken. I don't know how many more excuses I can conjure up for you if Julian comes looking."
Julian. Just the mention of him soured the saliva on my tongue. As if Julian will miss out on the dance of the Dryads. That pompous prick loves the opportunity for attention, I replied. Julian Gathrax, the eldest child and next in the line to rule the kingdom, was a sinister monster. For years he had made his intentions with me clear. Even without admitting the extent of it to Dame, or my parents, the mere mention of him made me uneasy. But I was right about one thing. Julian would not be home tonight. Not with the opportunity of so much attention, which was something he needed as desperately as a fish needs water. I could tell from Dame's expression that she was not as convinced on the matter as I was.
"I'm wasting my breath with you."
I shrugged. Can you blame me for thirsting for escape?
"I don't, but I do think it's sensible you restrict yourself to dreaming in the fringes of sleep."
Dame slipped between the oak doors, all without taking her eyes off me.
"For punishment leaves no scars during a dream. I cannot say the same for the hand of the Gathrax heir if he comes looking."
What Dame suggested was true, but I hadn't the heart to tell her Julian's slap never left a lingering mark, at least one that would not fade quickly. I would know. I had experienced enough of them. I raised a hand to my heart as the corner of my mouth lifted into a smirk. "You regret making me join you tonight when I come looking for a dance?"
"With me?"
Dame almost choked on her rasped laugh. "Trust me, I could rattle those bones like no other." One sharp slap on my upper arm, Dame's ancient face broke into the brightest of smiles.
"Did I mention you are insufferable, Maximus?"
I leaned into the door, slowly closing it. "Did I mention I love you?" Dame left, but a knot of unease had settled in my stomach. This was the power Julian Gathrax had over me. The mere mention of him made my skin itch and my chest tighten. Chapter 2. I slipped around the shelves, writing desks and mountainous cabinets, dabbing the brown cloth in the vial of diluted oil. I rubbed it across the oak shelves until they glistened. I moved quickly, losing myself deeper into the library. The sooner I was finished, the sooner I could kick my boots up and lose myself in some romance between star-crossed lovers. There was a sense of identity to this place, and it warmed me better than any burning fire. So many histories of those who came before me. History was something I would never have. I lived the life of a ghost. My existence would leave no mark on the map of this world. I was merely a nameless servant, moving from room to room and completing the same tasks day to day. Unlike the many whose stories sat around me, I'd never have a life worth writing about. Ghosts were beings of shadow, not parchment and quill. The thought once bothered me, but now, with age, it didn't. Never had I heard my mother complain about her duties. Even after busy days minding King Gathrax's youngest children, when she'd return home with arms black and blue with bruises, she always found something to enjoy. It was the same with my father. He worked tirelessly on the estate's endless grounds and would often return home exhausted, especially during the winter months. He would fall asleep before raising a morsel of food to his mouth. And yet, he never made comment about how bad our lives were. As I always did, I left cleaning the portraits to last. Pulling up a stool, I reached up and dragged mounds of the grime from the tops of the frames. Holding back a sneeze, I cleared as much as I could reach and watched it fall to the dark cedar floor like a sprinkling of fresh snow. The painting before me was of a rounded man, cheeks as red as the jacket he wore, which was bursting at the seams. Some long-dead relative of the Gathrax family tree. There had been enough of them. He faced the painter, his hand raised until the telltale sign of his magic was on display. Scarred across the man's palm was his mage mark. 3 interconnecting circles of puckered skin, threaded by 2 crossing lines that sliced through the scars. It was a sign of power, a mark that set those with magic apart from those without it. A mark that had not been seen since the Heart Oak was destroyed by the North. A mage mark. My arms ached by the time I reached the final portrait. A familiar shiver coursed up my spine as I took in the depiction mere inches from my face. My legs wobbled slightly as I reached to clean the glass protecting it. Across the canvas, scripted in a gold leaf paint, was the title of the art, End of Red. Most of the image was painted with dull earth tone colours, except for the angry splashes of crimson cutting across a man, slain among a circle of his enemies. Mage Damien Gathrax, the last mage to fall in the War of the Wood, stared back at me with all-seeing eyes. His wand lay snapped at his side, and blood pooled beneath him. Looking on from the shadows of trees was the masked army of the North. They were no more than phantoms lacking details. A floorboard creaked somewhere behind me. I gasped, startled. Before I could laugh it off, a voice called out from the shadows. "I thought I would find you here, Max." Blood drained from my face. I turned around to locate the speaker and lost my footing on the stool. It tilted beneath me, and suddenly I was falling. The herringbone floor raced up to greet me. I landed heavily in a lump with the echo of smashed glass at my side. Slightly winded, I looked up to find Julian Gathrax. He knelt before me. "Oh dear. Allow me to help you." Julian held his hand outstretched towards me, fingers wiggling as they waited for me to take them, which I didn't. I pushed myself from the floor, nicking my palm on a broken piece of glass. Recoiling with a hiss, the shallow cut stung, coated in spilled oil. "Your Grace, forgive me. I didn't hear you come in." I lowered my gaze, but not before I caught the disappointment on his face. "And what exactly are you apologising for this time, Maximus?" My name sounded vile on his tongue. He dragged it out, hissing as it came to an end. I glanced up at him with an unwavering gaze. Julian had leaned himself up against the shelf, taut arms folded across his chest. His jacket was the shade of a ripened blood orange, the shirt beneath it white and full like the feathers of a proud bird. He was taller than me, only by a few inches, but I knew just how those few inches could make such a difference. Like his father, Julian's hair was the colour of autumn leaves, another sign of his powerful heritage. That and the same sharp nose of his great-grandfather, Mage Damien Gathrax, whose picture towered behind me. He was a strange type of handsome, the type that set me at unease. "Is there something I can help you with, Julian?" I asked, unsure of what else to say. "Don't act coy with me, Max. I think you know exactly what it is I want. Have I not made it obvious?" Julian stepped towards me, boots crunching glass. I couldn't move back, even if I wanted to. I knew better than to make Julian think I was refusing him. It never ended well if I did. "You have," I replied. "But have I not made my answer equally as obvious?" Julian recoiled, eyes widening.
"I dislike your tone."
His grin cut wider across his face, his thin lips almost disappearing into his pale skin.
"Perhaps a lesson in manners, or a simple reminder as to why you belong to me, and thus should do as I please?"
"That," I said, clutching my bleeding hand, "won't be necessary." As if Julian could smell my wound, his gaze dropped to it.
"Oh gosh, you have hurt yourself."
He faked surprised concern, hand reaching for my own.
"I will kiss it better."
I pulled away, but he was quicker. Julian snatched my hand in his, not bothering to be gentle. His touch was icy, firm. I winced as his nails scratched my warm skin. This close to him, his scent smothered anything else. A tidal wave of lavender and mint cascaded over me, building with each inhale. Julian smelled of wealth, of power. He raised my palm to his mouth. His gaze immobilized me, as did the sickening press of his parted lips and the slight tickle of his tongue which spread across my calloused palm. I opened my mouth to say something, but my breath hitched in my throat.
"Better?"
he asked, lowering my hand from his mouth, refusing to let it go. "Please," I began, voice shaking with anger more than fear.
"Please what?"
Julian's grip tightened as he felt my attempt to tug away from him. "Let fucking go." Julian's eyes widened.
"What a tongue you have on you, Maximus. I like it, but I want to hear you ask me nicely."
"Please, let me fucking go." His gaze narrowed.
"Do you believe me to be kind, like my father?"
Julian leaned in, the smell of his warm breath offensive. "I think you could be kind," I lied.
"Ah,"
Julian exhaled, shaking his head until a strand of red hair cascaded over his azure eyes.
"You are right, Maximus. It has been hard not to think of you these days, and when you refuse me, it hurts."
"I really should go before my parents wonder where I am." A shadow crossed over Julian's angular face, his sharp brow furrowed. His smile straightened into a long, pale line. Before my eyes, his calm demeanour melted, revealing something darker beneath it.
"I am not finished. We are not finished. That is why you are here, isn't it? Because you waited for me. You knew I would come looking for you."
"No, Julian," I said, knowing what was to happen next. "That isn't what this is."
"No, Julian,"
he mocked, voice forced high and eyes rolling into his hairline. "Max, do not spoil this moment." Julian released my hand, allowing me to step away until the portrait was pressed into my back. Its presence reminded me I had nowhere to go. "I shall have you, Max. This chase you keep up will come to its end soon, perhaps tonight. Do you know the life I could give you? The status, power, the wealth? Stop resisting, stop fighting it, and give in." Disgust coiled through me. "And my answer, as it has been before, is no." I forced as much confidence into my reply. Although this man frightened some part of me, There was another part of me that longed to strike him. I could do it. I had no doubt in my ability to run him through. He was reed-thin and tall. I might not have been riddled with muscle, but my compact height could overpower him. It was the consequences that kept me in line. It was not only my life at risk if I defied the Gathrax family, it was my parents' well-being, and I would do anything to keep them safe. Have a good evening.
Would you like to see what my father has gifted me?
I shook my head, rising and trying to walk past him, only to be stopped as Julian moved his body in my way. Julian, let me leave.
It seems you do need reminding that I own you.
Julian slipped his hand towards his belt, all without removing his gaze from me. Slowly, he withdrew something from it. The blade, gripped in his fist, caught the fading light of the room.
Beautiful, isn't she? The handle was crafted from the antlers of a fully grown stag, the very one I slaughtered during last year's hunt. Father had it made for me. Do you like it?
I caught my distorted reflection in the blade as Julian twirled it before my face. Wide green eyes unblinking, frightened.
I do prefer you speechless,
Julian purred. Now, give me your arm.
Why?
The word broke out of me, half gasp and half sob. Julian sounded almost bored as he replied, Do not make me ask again. Refusing him was my only option. Julian flashed his teeth, grunted, and then lunged for me. There was no running. I jerked back and slammed my head into the wall. The moment of disorientation worked in Julian's favour as he pulled my dirtied work shirt up and exposed the skin of my forearm. Julian snaked the blade up. The tip pressed into my wrist until the skin beneath turned white.
Scream!
He spat, inches from my face.
No one will come to find you, and when they do, they will think it was your clumsiness that caused my mark.
His eyes flicked to the broken vial by our feet. You don't need to do this. Anger sparked deep within, a rush of emotion warming my frozen body. I pulled back from him as much as his hold allowed. Julian's taunting laugh echoed back at me. Squinting his eyes, he lifted the blade and looked down the sharp edge at me.
I own you. You are mine.
Fuck you.
Finally, you are coming round to the idea, then.
Julian winked, and my revulsion reached new heights. The air shifted as he thrust the blade forward. Without thinking, I pulled my arm back, palm spread, and slammed it into the side of his face. The slap silenced the room. Julian gasped as he turned away from me, his hand pressed against his cheek. It took 3 heavy breaths for the realization of what I had done to catch up with me. Through tear-filled eyes, Julian glared at me, spit lining his slack mouth. I had never seen him speechless. But when he removed his hand from his cheek to reveal the red mark of my handprint, I could see why.
You will pay for that.
I shot forward, fueled by the same foolish desperation that made me hit the king's son, and attacked him again. With every ounce of strength, I pushed hard into Julian's narrow chest with both hands. It was all I needed for him to fall backwards, arms flailing. The thump of his reed-thin body smacking into the floor was followed by the clink of his dagger as it clattered into the shadows of the room. I allowed myself a moment of confusion. Then I ran. Chapter 3. It was early evening, and Gathrax Manor was empty, its residents and serving staff far away in town enjoying the festivities. which meant no one witnessed me running through empty corridors and rooms, nor heard Julian Gathrax scream with deranged